So this is the setup for the glove box lathe. We have the lathe here, and it's a CNC and manual capable lathe. Then we have the control computer that is Mach 3, and that will control and run the G-code files that you put on it to run the lathe. And then you have your actual control box that powers everything and runs the stepper motors. So this lathe can be used in manual or CNC mode. Right now it's under CNC control, so the steppers can't be moved. I can change it to manual mode on the control box itself, and then now the steppers can be actually turned. It's important to note that if you do this, however, you will need to turn back on, once you turn the control system back on, Mach 3, you'll need to rehome it, because once you do that, you lose position. So, but in order to just show you some different aspects of the lathe, I'm going to keep it in manual mode. So basically, you have your chuck here, you have a quick change tool post and your tailstock here. You've got some homing switches back here that are your reference locations when you're in CNC mode. So that's the basic elements of the lathe. The quick change tool post, you can just use this screw in order to release it. You can adjust the height using this brass nut here, and then you can put on a different tool like so, and then lock it in place. So that's how you use the quick change tool post. This here is the tailstock. In order to be able to make your square part, we needed to raise up the tailstock, so it's on a riser, so you're actually going to want to tighten these screws here when you want to lock it in place. You might be just fine just locking down one of them, the center one, but you can lock down all three if you want, and then basically this thing can slide. The chuck is here right now. You have a 4-jaw chuck since you're going to be using a square piece. A bunch of different chucks can be, are available for this lathe. This is how you adjust it open and close. So this is a 4-jaw chuck that has all of the jaws will close simultaneously and open simultaneously. So basically, if the part's not very square, it's not going to be able to, it's only going to end up holding on 2 jaws. So in that case, if you want to change it, you just have to, you can use this lock bar back here if it's on there tight. So if you want to undo it, you're going to have to go like this. And now you can screw off the chuck. And then you can make sure everything's clean and then put on any other chuck. This is another chuck you guys are getting that is a 4-jaw independent. So this one actually, you can adjust each jaw independently. So if your part's not very square, this is a good option. So you can basically make sure all 4 sides of your bar are being clamped. So you just have to decide what's going to work best for you guys and then install the appropriate chuck, but you have both options. I'm going to go ahead and put on the 4-jaw dependent chuck so it's easier to use for the moment. Okay, so that's how you would install the chuck. The other thing is the Z-axis homing switch position is this bracket here. So this bracket, this aluminum bracket here holds the Z-axis home switch position. So it's adjustable. So depending, right now I've set it up so this cutter can't hit this chuck. But for example, if you install this chuck, which is a little bit longer, you might need to adjust the position of the homing switch. So just be aware that it's okay to adjust this. So this is actually a metric screw here, an M5 set screw. So you're going to have to use a 2.5 millimeter Allen, and you can loosen these two screws here. And then you should be able to adjust the position by sliding it along. So just note that you can adjust it to the position that works best for you. It's nice to have it in a position where you know you're not going to crash the cutter into the chuck, because this switch also acts as a limit switch. So if you hit it while you're running the machine in CNC mode, the system will actually e-stop. So just note if you are jogging and all of a sudden the CNC control system goes into reset mode, then that means you probably hit a limit switch. Okay, so that would be the overview of the actual lathe itself. So this is a quick overview of the actual control panel here. So basically you can run in auto or manual mode. Auto mode is whenever you're using Mach 3, and manual mode is if you're just using the machine manually, moving the hand wheels by hand and starting the spindle here. So you can only start the spindle with this setup. Because of the way this lathe is, you're not going to be able to use this potentiometer, so don't try to use this. You have to actually use a potentiometer that's on the lathe itself. But basically you can press start and the spindle will start up, and then stop and the spindle will stop. And this is only in manual mode. Then in order to use in CNC mode, you need to press to the auto side of the switch, and then you can open up Mach 3. Okay, so you want to make sure you're in auto mode on the control panel and the controller's on, powered on, and then you want to turn on Mach 3 loader by double clicking, and then you want to select the profile. There's only one profile you can select. Then you just want to say OK, and the name of the profile is glovebox lathe with tool post inch. And you should see that load up there. That's the actual Ethernet controller, so that we know there's a connection. And then you want to press reset. And now you're basically connected to the controller. There's some other examples of why you wouldn't be connected. For example, if the controller was off and you try to turn it on, you're basically going to have this start up, and then it's going to give you this ESS did not respond. So that basically means that you're not connected. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the power to the controller and let it start up, and then I can say press yes to try reconnecting. Now you see it load up, so we're good. You can see here I'm resetting and then it goes away. But for example, if I was in manual mode, you would try to reset and it won't reset. So got to make sure I'm in auto mode, then press reset. Now everything's fine. So the first thing you're going to do is go to manual mode, and then there's this home all button here. So as soon as you enter into the CNC, you want to make sure you home the lathe. So I'm going to press home all, and then it should home the lathe. Okay, so now the lathe is homed. So then if you're actually going to run G-code, you want to go to auto mode, and this is where you can load your G-code file that you've created. You want to make sure you're in the right format for the .nc file or .text or all files to be able to find your actual G-code file. You can also, depending on what you're doing, you can use the wizard here. So you can say pick wizard and go to turning, run. And it sounds like for what you guys are doing, you're going to be doing something like an OD turning. So basically you're just trying to cut down a square bar. So you just want to know what your X end and X start. So we're working in radius mode, so everything needs to be done in radius mode. So you know, if you have a 1-inch diameter piece of stock, then I'm telling it to start at 0.55, which gives us the 50 thousandths clearance in the X direction. And then this is the Z start and the Z end. So I think I have everything set up here reasonably, so I can do a post code. And so this will actually just do a bunch of small fine cuts to cut down the stock to a certain cylindrical diameter. So I can say save settings here, so it saves my settings, so I can just come back and I don't lose it. Then I can go back to the main screen, exit here, and now you can see I have my G-code file here, and if I go over here you can actually see the G-code file that's been created. So the other thing though is you got to make sure that you actually have zeroed your machine. I mean, once you zero your x-axis and your z-axis, if you have the piece of stock you're putting in, the setup's more or less the same, then you really don't have to zero again. But it's always good to check that everything's okay. So you got to make sure you're also on the right screen for when you're jogging, and you want to make sure that over here on this screen that you have jog on. Sometimes people might click this button here, so it turns jog off, and then you're not able to jog anymore with the keyboard. And oh yeah, mentioning the jogging, in order to jog the machine, you can use these keys here to jog the machine. And you can actually change the jog settings by pressing the tab key. And then you can change like the speed. So right now it's running at 25% jog rate, and I can change that, you know, to 10% jog rate if I want. So the max, so the speed when I press the key is only 10% in this case. Or I can change this to, you know, 70%, so it's going to go super fast. So you can press the tab key and that will go away, but I'm going to change this back to 25%. Tab key. So basically, I'm going to jog this around and kind of see where things are. Okay, so this looks like about my zero location here in X. The best way to really set up your X correctly is to actually take a test cut and then put in the actual diameter, and we can go over that next. So I'm going to put a piece of stock in here, tighten up the chuck. It's a piece of plastic. I'm just going to use this live center here. One thing you want to be careful for too is that you have enough clearance relative to the tailstock, so you're actually going to have to push this out quite far to make sure, you know, you want to jog to the front of your stock, and then make sure that you're not hitting the tailstock, because there's not that much clearance there. So you know, you're going to have to put this out pretty far and then lock this, you want to lock this screw down here and then tighten this up. I didn't drill a center hole in this piece of stock, just because it's plastic. I'm actually just putting some force on this and letting it make a small, you know, divot into the part. I think that's fine for right now, but depending on your application, you know, you can try either way. Depending on what material you're using, you might be able to get away with that because you're really just using it as support. But if you have to drill a center hole, you can do that with an actual drill chuck that we will provide. So basically what I'm going to do now is take a rough cut on this material, and then I'm going to measure it and then enter that value into the CNC controller, so that way everything's set for my next operations. Okay, so now I'm going to take a test cut. I'm going to turn the spindle on with the spindle on button inside Mach 3. You can adjust the RPM here to what you need. So basically now what I'm going to do is just take this fine finish cut and then I'm not going to move in the X. You don't want to move in the X at all once you're done with this. So no moving the X axis. Then I'm going to press spindle stop. Now I'm going to take a measurement cut here and see what I have. The measurement is 0.796 inches. So I'm going to have to divide that by 2. So 0.796 is the dimension I have. I'm going to divide that by 2. So 0.398. So right now, instead of this axis position is telling me I'm at 0.224. Well, that can't be right, because when I actually take a cut, it's coming out as 0.398. So I'm actually just going to enter 0.398 into here. And then some additional information here is you can actually go to fixtures and see the G54 offset right now from the homing switch is negative 1.5. So this is the distance from the homing switch to the 0 of our machine. And this actually should change, so the next time I home, this number will actually be correct when I take a cut. So I'm going to close this, and then I'm going to enter in the value 0.398 and press the enter button. Whenever you put in a number here, you need to press the enter button. And then now if I go back to the offsets, fixtures, this should have changed, and yes it did. And then I want to press the save button. You can also, maybe a good idea is to write this number down. This Y value doesn't mean anything actually, but the X and the Z do. So you can also write this down, because for example, if a colleague comes in and doesn't know what they're doing and zeros something, you're going to lose it. So if you write these down, you can always put them back in and then get back to that position. Additional information, here's the MDI bar. This is useful for entering in G-code commands if you wanted to say G00X, 1, or let's say 0.5. This would move the machine to 0.5. That's a useful tool, and you could also, for example, turn on the spindle here, M3.
Sorry,
turn the spindle on, and then I could also say M5.
Sorry,
and then
I didn't find them.
turn that off. Seems like Alexa wants to join in the conversation. So that's basically the setup for adjusting your X value. And like I said, if you use the homing function, depending on how accurate you're trying to make your parts, it should be pretty good. So you home the machine, and then you should have already your cutter pretty good in the x-axis. You might need to make slight adjustments while you're running. For example, you run your part and it doesn't come out exactly at 1 inch. It comes out at a thousandths over, 2 thousandths over, or under. Well, then you just need to make the adjustment either here or in the fixture like I showed. You can adjust this value, and then it will adjust accordingly on the part itself. So you're also going to want to jog your z-axis over to the front of the stock by maybe 50 thousandths past the stock, past the end of the stock. So since the z0 is the front of the stock, so I jog there now, and then I'm going to zero the z-axis, and then I'm going to press cycle, which actually takes me to the other window, the other screen, and then I can run the program here. Please note this message here, too slow for pulley using min. You can ignore that. That's just because we're not using spindle speed control, so you can ignore that message. Doesn't mean anything. So anyway, I'm going to press cycle start now, and it should run the program. So now it's actually, you can see on Mach 3 that it's running. And this is your feed rate here. So anyway, you can press, if you like, you can press the space bar. That will pause the program. You're going to have to, though, you will need to turn the spindle back on and then press cycle start if you want to continue. So that's the basics of using the machine.